Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. From everyone at Scary Shorties, I just wanted to give a big thank you. This is our 1 year anniversary, and we couldn't have done it without the fans. Thanks, guys. Blackouts. Written by Fanny Fleming. Read by Drew Grimm. Me and my partner, Mark Holland, were on our way to the small rural town of Roseport, Virginia. Just a week earlier, a powerful storm had torn through the area, causing a widespread blackout in the small community. When the power and communications came back to Roseport 3 days later, local authorities didn't respond to state police check-ins. The sheriff's department and the mayor's office only replied with automated messages. It wasn't long before nearby communities noticed the town seemed deserted, and state authorities started getting hundreds of calls about missing loved ones. Stranger still was the governor's decision to call in the National Guard to quarantine the small town. Mark and I had been briefed the day before in a small tent just outside its limits. We weren't given many details, only that it definitely wasn't a gas leak, and masks wouldn't be necessary. As young agents, we figured this was the kind of assignment meant for newer teams to cut their teeth on. The briefing described it as a straightforward evidence collection, with a bit of light investigation. The Bureau assumed most of the townspeople had left to stay elsewhere, and just hadn't come back yet. They didn't, however, have an explanation for why the local authorities had gone silent. The National Guard was already blocking the main road into town, so Mark slowed down and rolled down his window to show our identification. The young soldier didn't even bother checking it, and simply waved us through. They'd probably been expecting us. As we drove into Roseport, the streets were eerily empty as we slowly cruised down the main street. Mark didn't say a word, but made a sucking sound through his teeth. That meant he was thinking. I jokingly told him to spit it out.
All right, so hear me out. The town thinks a tornado is coming. Everyone gathers in some homeowner's underground bunker, and then they end up becoming stuck.
I think on it for a minute, while I gaze out of the window to the empty town of Roseport. Why the quarantine, then? Mark raised an eyebrow and slowly shook his head, clearly thinking.
Robbie, that's the one part I really can't pin down.
Within 2 blocks of the town square, we pull up to a lovely craftsman's home with a white picket fence. It was the address we were told to start at. We step out and take a second to look at the empty street.
Christ, Robbie, why didn't they brief us that all their vehicles are still in the driveways?
I don't know, Mark. Seems like it was intentional, though. Both agents paused for a long moment, locking eyes. Then they each drew their firearms and adopted a more cautious stance, While entering the first residence, they would investigate. After scouring the house from top to bottom, Mark and I sit in the kitchen for a minute to collect our thoughts.
The old-timer put up a hell of a fight, Robbie.
That was definitely an understatement. The resident was a man in his 90s who seemed to live alone, with no nurse or family around. His house was scattered with shotgun pellets from top to bottom, and someone, maybe the old man himself, had tried to block off the chimney. Mark stood before it, sucking his teeth again.
Maybe he was trying to keep Santa out.
I try to give him a dry laugh, but I become excited when I see the letter resting on the dining room table. Mark waits patiently as I speed read all 5 pages. I take a deep breath and bag the letter for evidence. The owner's name was Russell. He seemed to have some kind of mental break. The storm probably brought it on. The letter is nonsensical. He thinks a monster from his childhood is attacking the town.
Damn. I was hoping it would mention Santa.
We decide to cruise the streets more and see if we spot any houses worth going into. Slowly driving, looking for any anomaly that could lead to a clue. The total absence of people, not passing another car, was so profound, it felt like a horror movie. As we rounded the next street, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye and tell Mark to stop. We step out, and Mark follows me to the back of a blue house with white trim. Hiding in a deep hole dug beneath a huge shed was a terrified German Shepherd and its apparent owner. The man, who looked to be in his late 30s, had tried to bury himself. His skin was blue, and he was starting to decompose. The shepherd had stayed by his side. She was dirty and probably starving.
Jesus Christ, Robbie. This guy suffocated himself trying to hide from something.
I find a couple cans of dog food and put them in front of the shed. With wild eyes, the shepherd belly crawls out to the dish and wolfs down the food. I start to get dizzy. This is the first time I've seen a dead body. Mark grabs my arm and gestures to sit on the closest lawn furniture. Neither of us speak. The silence is interrupted by the footsteps of the shepherd, cautiously approaching us. Mark begins to stroke the dog's neck and sneaks a peek at the collar.
It appears this beautiful lady's name is Lily.
The shepherd wags its tail when hearing its name. Mark speaks softly to her.
It's okay, girl. You can trust us. What's out there, huh? What did you see?
We decide to take our only witness with us. Lily is too weak to prevent Mark from picking her up, and we carry her to the car. She sits up front with us and lays on my lap. Mark sucks his teeth, and I tell him to spit it out.
The letter from the old man. What did it say exactly?
He wakes up during the blackout, checks on his neighbor across the street. When he peeks into the window, he sees a walking shadow with yellow eyes and shark teeth floating upstairs. He rushes in after blasting the door.
And then what?
Nothing. No monster, no neighbor. The next morning, he realizes everyone in town is gone. He's convinced the next day he can hear the monster coming for him because of his hearing aid. Mark makes a face while stroking his chin.
Well, the old man definitely lost his marbles. But what the hell would scare Lily's owner to bury himself alive?
I've got a better question. If the old man did go off his rocker, what the hell was he shooting at? The three of us went from house to house, searching for any clues, even combing through the backyards to see if anyone had tried to hide or bury themselves like Lily's owner. Furniture and toys sat scattered in almost every yard. Nothing unusual about them. The houses felt frozen in time, just waiting for life to return. There were no hints about what happened to the people who once lived there. They were simply gone, vanished in real time. It was still critical that we keep looking for physical evidence before nightfall. We were explicitly briefed to leave before the sun came down, and we were running out of time now. The sun was going down in about an hour. We decide to head to the center of town and search the sheriff's office before returning. Inside the small brick building, we find nothing to speak of until Lily begins to scratch at the basement door. Mark is the first to notice the blood trail.
Someone dragged themselves into the basement, Robbie. They were bleeding heavily and couldn't stand.
We both draw our service weapons again, and I check the door handle. It's unlocked. I start down the basement stairs with Mark close behind me. We carefully avoid stepping into the blood as we move. Mark calls out, asking anyone present to make themselves known, identifying us as federal agents here to help. We don't get a response. I tell Mark to stay by the base of the stairs while I begin to search with a flashlight. I follow the blood trail to the far corner of the room, behind the giant furnace. The smell lets me know we have another body on our hands. Mark, I found our belly crawler. When Agent Holland made his way over, he couldn't stop himself from throwing up his early breakfast. I had to take a knee myself, feeling a bit lightheaded from the smell and the scene before me. The sheriff had tried to crawl into the furnace, but lacked the strength. It was clear why. His body was torn apart from head to toe, as if he'd been through a wood chipper. Still, he somehow managed to scrawl 3 lines in his own blood on the wall behind him. In all capital letters, it read, "They come from the roofs. They can smell our blood. They eat our flesh like cotton candy." Mark pulled out his phone and began to take pictures, and I was finally able to gather myself, and I stood up again. Checking my own phone, I realized the sun had been down for around 10 minutes already. "We missed our ETA, Mark. It's time to head out before we get into real trouble.
Robbie, whatever happened to this place is the real trouble.
As we leave the sheriff's office, I notice the street lights are not coming on. I thought they said power had been restored. Mark sucked his teeth and pulled out his own flashlight, looking around the now darkening town square.
I think it's another blackout.
Mark swung his flashlight on Lily. She was shaking so hard she almost couldn't stand. She had wet herself and was making whimper sounds.
It's okay, girl. We're almost to the car. Man, something has her spooked, Robbie.
When Mark finally took his attention away from Lily, he caught sight of the pale look on my face. Following my gaze, he turned slowly and looked up at the rooftops of the town buildings. Piercing yellow eyes, fixed on us, glowed from 3 of the rooftops.
Robbie, take Lily to the car and come get me. If those fucking eyes start moving, I'm going to engage them with deadly force.
I scoop up Lily and run to the car. She's not the lightest dog, but she doesn't resist. We both drop into the front seat, and I fire up the engine. That's when I hear the gunfire start. Mark is emptying his pistol, and emptying it fast. No steady bursts, just frantic shots that suggest he's up against multiple targets. When I pull around, I don't see him anywhere. What I do see looks like something out of a nightmare. It's floating in front of my vehicle, maybe 10 feet away, almost shaped like a person. Yellow pinpoint eyes stare at me with a wide grin full of jagged, sharp teeth. In its grip is Mark's severed arm. The monster begins to eat the flesh like it was cotton candy. It winks at me. I pull away hard, and Lily slides to the floor with a whelp. I speed away as fast as possible, trying not to lose my mind. I frantically check the rearview mirror every 3 seconds. It feels like a lifetime before I make it back to the National Guard checkpoint again. It was a lot more alive with activity than when I passed through this morning. Soldiers were running around in every direction, shouting at each other. They barely noticed me. I had to step out to get their attention. I managed to grab a young private by his arm. "Soldier, I'm Federal Agent Williams. I need—" "Sorry, sir, but we've been ordered to evacuate this area ASAP. There's been a national emergency declared by the president. We're dealing with another blackout." "Where, soldier? Where's the blackout this time?" "The entire East Coast, sir.